Hey there, viewers. Just when it seemed like the case was sealed, a new discovery has shaken everything up. Could Diddy actually walk free? The latest development has both sides scrambling, and it might change the entire outcome. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. The Other Courtroom. Don't work the big trials. I'm not the guy who gets assigned to those high-profile courtrooms with news cameras and rows of attorneys in custom suits. I usually handle the overflow rooms, the courtrooms nobody notices, the ones tucked down the hall like forgotten closets. Juvenile cases, probation hearings, parole renewals, quiet stuff that doesn't make the news. That's where I belong. That's what I signed up for. I'm Ray, contracted through a federal vendor to do digital systems support, courtroom A/V evidence playback, monitor setups. I'm not law enforcement, and I'm definitely not legal counsel. I keep the screens working and make sure the right file plays when the judge says, "Roll Exhibit C." I don't ask questions, not officially. That morning started like most. I had just finished helping reset the projector system in 6C. It had been glitching out whenever someone tried to show photos from an old iPad. I was halfway through my second coffee, sitting in the hallway outside courtroom 7A, when I got the call. It wasn't a phone call, actually. It was one of those automated pings we get through the internal court tech system. Just said, "Air Courtroom 8B playback failure. Technician requested. No details." That wasn't strange. Half the time it was someone forgetting to plug in a flash drive. Courtroom 8B is usually used for juvenile hearings, mostly empty. Nobody wants to be there longer than they have to. But when I walked in, the courtroom felt off. Not busy, not loud, just this kind of paused feeling. The judge hadn't arrived yet, and there were only two people sitting in the gallery. A young woman in a hoodie staring down at her shoes, and a probation officer with a clipboard looking half asleep. I made my way up to the console behind the judge's bench, where the playback terminal lives. It had restarted on its own and was stuck on a black screen with a blinking cursor. Standard Windows shell override. Not normal, but not unheard of either. I tapped the keyboard and it opened to the desktop. A single file was sitting in the root directory. No folder, just floating there like someone dropped it there by accident. It was labeled Session 9, Exculpatory Set, Compliance, Tier, Unverified. I frowned. The naming didn't match our courtroom naming schema. Usually files are labeled by trial number or exhibit code, but this looked like some kind of internal set designation. And compliance tier? That's language I'd only ever heard once before, when I was shadowing a more senior tech during a sealed trial years back. I remembered because he'd told me not to say anything afterward. The mouse hovered over the file. Just instinct, I guess. I clicked it open. The file launched a video player I didn't recognize. Not VLC, not Windows Media. It was a blank player frame with no controls, just blackness. Then the video started. It was surveillance footage, grainy, like an old hotel security cam, maybe 480p max. The audio had this weird hum under it, like a fan blowing into the mic. It was centered on a hotel suite, ornate but lived in. Bottles on the counter, a jacket draped over a chair. Someone was pacing near the edge of the bed. He moved into view. It was him, Diddy, Sean Combs. I froze. He looked nothing like he does on TV. No sunglasses, no dancers, no crowd. He was barefoot, wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and gray sweatpants. His face was raw, not bruised, not hurt, just unmasked, like someone who'd been crying, not sobbing, but like the tears had already come and gone, and now only the quiet was left. He was talking, not yelling, not posturing, talking low, like to someone behind a camera. "I didn't know," he said, stepping toward the edge of the frame. "I didn't know what they were doing. You have to believe me." The woman's voice was never audible. I could tell there was someone there, just off screen, maybe sitting on the couch, maybe standing just out of frame. But she didn't speak, only he did. I thought it was part of the deal. I thought they were just... He rubbed his eyes. I never asked questions. I just... Look, if I sign whatever, if I disappear for a while, will that be enough? Then the screen blinked. The video froze on his face, then cut to black. The file vanished. Literally gone from the desktop. No delay, no confirmation prompt. It just closed itself and erased from view like it had never been there. I panicked. I tried to check the temp folder. Nothing. Recycle bin, empty. Search bar, no trace. I opened the playback logs. Our terminal keeps an index of every file accessed in a 72-hour window. There it was, barely still visible before it purged. See AuthorTech Media, 37,452 to 545450. Underscore compliance, underscore unverified, underscore 4C, F. Trial ID 37,452, FE4. That's Diddy's federal trial number. I'd seen it printed on news flashes, watermarked on court camera test screens. But the location of the file? AuthorTech Media? That's not standard. That's a placeholder directory used for overflow tech queues, files that get routed out of mainline servers because they're either too big, untagged, or failed legal review. This one had been tagged as submitted by the defense, marked inadmissible, and then sent to juvenile tech overflow. Why would that happen? Evidence submitted by Diddy's own lawyers, labeled inadmissible, then redirected accidentally, intentionally to a juvenile courtroom system. My palms were sweating. I took out my phone and snapped a photo of the playback log screen, but the screen blinked again. Log purged. Camera froze. My phone crashed. I rebooted it. The photo wasn't there. Just sat there for a while. The room still felt empty, but different now, like I wasn't supposed to be in it anymore. When I left the courtroom, the young woman in the hoodie looked up at me like she knew, not just stared, she knew, then went back to her shoes. I went to the clerk's desk to ask about the case in 8B. Just a juvenile parole review, the woman told me. Nothing's being played today, no video. I tried to ask if the terminal had been preloaded by mistake. She said the terminal hadn't been used in 2 days, and nobody had logged into it under my credentials. She showed me the screen. According to the system, I hadn't even been in there. Back in the break room, I asked Kevin, one of the senior court techs, if he'd heard of anything called Session 9 connected to the Diddy trial. He looked at me like I had toilet paper stuck to my shoe. Session 9's not real, he said. That's like an old inside joke. From back when courtrooms were still analog, people used to blame playback errors on Session 9, like a ghost file. Don't go chasing tech legends, man. I didn't sleep that night. I kept hearing Diddy's voice. You have to believe me. I kept thinking about the look in his eyes. Not a man defending himself in court. Not a mogul. Just a man who'd run out of places to hide. I don't know if the footage was planted. I don't know if it was real. But someone went out of their way to route it into a courtroom where nobody would see it. And for some reason, I did. Maybe it was a mistake. Or maybe someone wanted me to see it. But the part I can't shake, the part that keeps me up, is that the voice didn't sound like someone guilty or innocent. It sounded like someone caught in someone else's trial. And that makes me wonder, what if this courtroom isn't about him at all? Chapter 2, Cycle Breaker Sync Error. My name is Rosa, and I file things for a living. That's the easiest way to put it, though the paperwork says Federal Archival Processing Technician Tier 3 Contractual. I used to be a court clerk, back before I realized that paper doesn't yell. Now I just deal with things that come in boxes. Thumb drives, sealed tapes, redacted transcripts, sometimes the old evidence logs that were never digitized properly. I don't get involved. I don't make decisions. I just assign what belongs where, make sure it matches the manifest, and forward it to the correct room. That's the job. 3 days ago, I was asked to assist on a temporary assignment, something called a pre-verdict documentation halt related to case 37,452-54. I didn't even need to look up the number. Everyone knows that one. You hear whispers in the hallway, the comms box, red tag folders only. I figured I'd be scanning in files, labeling drives, stuff like that. In cases like this, things get touchy. The defense submits more than they admit. The prosecution hides more than they can redact. My job was just to sort what got through and file it under the correct processing tier before the verdict locked it all down. The box was already waiting for me in room C11. That's the basement level where unclassified redactions go to wait for tier reassignment. I rolled the dolly in and noticed something immediately. There was a folder that didn't match the color code. Gray tag instead of red. It was labeled by hand in blue pen, Loop Draft 1. There was no official stamp, no barcode, no chain of custody sticker. That alone made me pause. I opened it. Inside was a USB drive stuck to a folded sheet of paper with masking tape. The paper had one sentence scrawled on it in red ink. Playback loop, Session 9, Compliance, Tier 4. Now that's not a term you see every day. Most evidence is tagged Tier 1 through 3. Tier 4 is rarely used, and when it is, it means something that's inherently unstable, either corrupted metadata or, more rarely, context-sensitive material that could only be processed by specific compliance officers. I'd never seen Tier 4 handed to a Tier 3 tech before. But there I was. I stared at the USB for a long time before plugging it in. The file was a video, unlabeled except for a long alphanumeric string that looked like a decryption key. No title, no author. I double-clicked. It started in the same room I'd seen in news stills. The hotel suite, dimly lit, same grainy quality, but a different angle. This camera was lower, maybe hidden under a cabinet or lodged in a wall vent. It gave a clear shot of the room. The furniture was familiar, ornate, expensive, soft-angled. And there he was again, Sean Combs. Same slouched posture, same sweatpants. But this time, Cassie was visible, fully in frame, sitting on the edge of the bed. She looked calm. Calm in a way that was more unsettling than if she'd screamed. He was pacing, hand running through his hair. The tension was visible in his shoulders. Cassie looked up at him and said in this soft, deliberate tone, "They said you'd take the fall. That was the deal." He froze. She didn't move. Then she added, "I wasn't supposed to still be here." Her voice didn't shake. She said it like someone repeating a rehearsed line. The video kept running. They sat there. No more words. Just silence. Thick and unnatural, like the sound had been filtered to keep anything human out. Like the space was waiting for a cue that never came. Then something strange happened. The video skipped, just a flicker, and suddenly both of them were facing forward, not looking at each other, looking into the camera. I leaned forward in my chair. I hadn't noticed the angle change, but it wasn't just that. Their expressions had changed. Diddy was now smiling. Not a wide grin, just a small, tired smile. Cassie, on the other hand, looked like she'd been crying, but her cheeks were dry, her eyes were locked forward, unblinking. Then the video ended. I blinked and realized I had been holding my breath. I moved to check the file's properties. I needed to log the metadata before assigning it to a folder. But when I looked at the timestamps, my stomach dropped. Creation date, May 3rd, 2025, 9:17 p.m. Modified, May 3, 2025, 9:23 p.m. That was after the DHS raid, after the known seizures of Combs' devices, after the court had already sealed most evidence pending compliance review. That couldn't be. I cross-referenced the file with the USB's creation stamp. The device was formatted 2 days after the video was supposedly filmed, and the drive itself was manufactured 6 months ago, a model not commercially available until March 2025. That meant the video hadn't just been late, it had been created after the fact, using hardware no one had access to at the time of the events it depicted. A post-dated video, possibly even staged. But why? Why include Cassie? Why make her speak as if she knew the fall was part of the plan? I copied the log, filed my preliminary notes, and escalated the folder to Tier 4 hold. Then I flagged the entry to my supervisor, Mark S., who handles elevated processing. I met him in the hallway and handed him the notes. "What's this from?" he asked, flipping through. "Combs' archive," I said. It was in an untagged folder, marked Ventura vs. Unknown. His eyes didn't even flicker. "Oh, that's Session 9 material," he said. "Rehearsal archive." I blinked. "Rehearsal?" He nodded. "Stuff that's used for compliance modeling. They make simulated testimony to see how it scores under jury interpretation metrics. It's not real evidence, it's narrative modeling. But it's labeled like testimony. It shows real people. Doesn't matter," he said. "You're not supposed to process it. Just route it to redacted trial, Class B. I'll take it from here." He took the folder and walked off before I could ask anything else. I stared at the hallway he'd disappeared into for a while, then went back to my desk. But something didn't sit right. I hadn't saved the playback to our terminal, so I went back, just in case. Maybe I could review it one more time, see if I imagined what she said. When I reached the shelf where the Combs folder had been, it was gone. The gray folder. No trace. Not in the manifest, not in the outgoing log, not in the security camera's timestamp. In its place was a manila envelope. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a drawing, a courtroom, sketched in black ink, the kind of quick lines someone makes when they've memorized the room by heart. Every bench, every seat. Two Diddy sat at the defense table. One was smiling, the other had his head in his hands. Above the judge's bench was no name, just a spiral drawn over and over until the paper had nearly torn through. I turned the paper over. No stamp, no date, no evidence number. I sat back down and stared at the image for a long time. The thing is, when I was a clerk years ago, I remember seeing a little girl in the back of courtroom 5A. She used to draw during hearings, quiet, alone. Her sketches always looked like this, not exact, but layered, like the paper couldn't hold everything she was seeing. She used to draw two of everything, 2 judges, 2 defendants, 2 verdicts. Like she didn't trust that the one we were watching was the one that would stick. And now here it was again, only this time the sketch wasn't from a child. It's left for me. I think it's telling me that this trial isn't about innocence or guilt. It's about which version we're willing to file away. Chapter 3. They called her crackpipe. People assume interpreters are there to make words sound prettier or softer in another language. But what I really do, what the job demands, is listening for things most people don't notice. Breath tension, vocal stumbles, timing gaps between impulse and utterance. Sometimes it's not what someone says, but how long they pause before saying it. That little vacuum between thought and sound, that's where the real meaning lives. My name's Kia. I've been a federal certified court interpreter for over 10 years. Spanish-English by training, but I specialize in forensic linguistics, which means I get pulled into strange corners of the justice system now and then. Cases that involve coded messaging, cult rhetoric, layered communications. Audio analysis is part of the package. They bring me in when what's said doesn't line up with how it's said. I wasn't expecting a call on the Diddy case, but then again, nobody really expects to be part of something like that. The request came through late at night. A flagged evidence file, an audio clip played in closed session that had caused some dispute. The judge wanted a linguistic analysis done quietly, without dragging in federal phonetic labs. They wanted something unofficial. My name came up. I took the job. They didn't even send the whole audio file, just a short sample, labeled, Calm's voice note excerpt, "You're my crackpipe." It was grainy, like it had been re-recorded from a speaker, not directly pulled from the source. That's usually a red flag. The phrase in question came at the 23-second mark. A low male voice, raspy and slow, slurred slightly at the end. "You're my crackpipe, you know that? You keep me lit." I replayed it. Again. There was a strange modulation in the sentence. The pitch of crackpipe wasn't natural, not like a live human saying it in one breath. I ran it through a spectrogram. What I found wasn't just odd, it was deliberate. There were two audio layers stitched together, same speaker, sure, but two separate takes of the phrase crackpipe, overlapping by just under 0.3 seconds, as if someone had blended two versions of the same sentence, one whispered, one spoken, into a single line. They did both tracks manually. The whispered track wasn't clear enough to make out all the words, but it ended with a distinct phrase layered under the last syllable. Session 9, playback pending. My spine tingled. I'd heard Session 9 before, not in court, not on the news, in training seminars, back rooms, quiet warnings passed between linguists who specialized in abnormal vocal structures. Session 9 wasn't a formal designation. It was a nickname given to cases where audio clips behaved like echo chambers, files that refused to stabilize, testimonies that replayed with new dialogue every time they were loaded on a fresh device, unstable evidence, performative loops, we called them. I pulled up my personal archive and ran the whisper's tonal fingerprint through my comparison logs. Not one match. Case sealed under federal compliance review, opportunistic compliance trial 171B, no public record, just a name and tone print. The original voice in that case? A young woman, unknown origin, but her whisper had a distinct flicker, like the waveform of a violin string plucked too sharply. The same flicker was in this recording. Which didn't make sense, because the whisper here was buried under Diddy's voice, which meant either it had been added artificially, or someone had taught a machine to echo a girl who hadn't existed for 8 years in any official record. I gathered my findings and contacted the assigned court liaison, a man named Waller who wore a badge but never said who he actually worked for. He skimmed the report and frowned. "This isn't relevant to the case," he said. "It came from the evidence itself," I reminded him. "The voice underneath? This isn't part of the original recording. It's an insertion, a loop." "It's not from our case," he replied. "And that voice doesn't belong here." "What does that mean?" He didn't answer. He just folded the printout, put it in his jacket and said, "Thank you for your contribution. We won't need further assistance." I should have pushed back. But I know how this works. Sometimes they want an expert not to confirm something, but to hear the wrong thing. And when you don't, they dismiss you. I flew back to my hotel that night. I kept thinking about the phrase, "You're my crackpipe." It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even possessive. It was pathological. But underneath it was something even worse. "You keep me lit." That's not just a metaphor, that's a system. That's consumption, not love. I fell asleep with my laptop open. I had the whisper isolated in one tab, replaying, headphones in, trying to hear something new in the rasp. Then I heard a knock. Not a loud one, just a paper slide beneath the door. I opened it. It was a folded sheet of paper, hotel stationery. In small, deliberate handwriting, it read, "You passed the silence test. That's why you heard it." No signature, no room number, no indication of who left it. I closed the door and locked it. Double bolt, chain, pulled the curtains shut. But the feeling stayed, like the recording was still playing even without the headphones. Like the words were still unfolding in some room I hadn't entered yet. That whisper, it wasn't embedded by accident. It wasn't a glitch. It was an invitation. Someone wanted that phrase heard by the right person. Not a judge, not a jury, not a victim. Someone who could hear what didn't belong and remember it. Maybe the courtroom's not the only place where the performance plays out. Maybe the real testimony isn't verbal at all. It's heard in layers by those who've already been prepared. And maybe, just maybe, that whisper wasn't a warning. It was a countdown. Chapter 4. FreePuff is a program. They don't train you for this kind of job in school. You don't take classes on how to spot deepfake empathy or reverse engineer bots built to cry. I started out doing brand sentiment analysis, checking hashtags during halftime ads, measuring spikes in reaction to sneaker drops or fast food stunts. But the past few years changed everything. These days I work on contract for a digital firm that monitors potential social media interference during federal trials. Basically, if the court is high profile enough, they want someone to make sure the jurors aren't being influenced by invisible hands. So I read tweets for a living, threads, Instagram captions, the weird places Reddit posts go to die. I'm not law enforcement. I don't make arrests or file motions. I just flag things that feel off and package them into a nightly digest for our liaison with the court. Most of the time it's nothing. Memes, people talking like they're lawyers when they've barely passed high school. But the Diddy trial was different. The volume was astronomical, thousands of posts per minute. Hashtags I hadn't even heard of the week before were now trending globally. The one that stood out was FreePuff. At first, I thought it was a joke, but it wasn't. It was coordinated. A full-blown campaign. We'd seen organized public narratives before, celebrities rallying fans, PR firms controlling the tempo of a conversation. But this felt different. The tone of it, the speed, the way these tweets appeared to respond to things that hadn't even happened in court yet. I ran a sampling sweep just to map out the most influential posts, accounts with the most shares, reposts, engagement. When I charted it out on the data board, I froze. They were all routing through the same server cluster. That's not normal. Organic movements don't function like that. They branch, diverge, overlap. These were too synchronized, like someone was puppeteering the entire narrative through one central hub. The cluster was labeled BB32, Restricted Node Pool. It didn't ring a bell immediately, so I ran a deeper trace. Bad Boy 32. That hit me like a slap. I remembered that name, not from recent contracts, but from an old cybersecurity memo we reviewed in 2019. A closed AI training server farm, supposedly built for consumer sentiment modeling under a short-lived division of Combs Global, back when they were trying to break into music tech crossovers. The project was scrapped when the division was dissolved in 2018, or so they said. But here it was again. Active. Running a pattern that was flooding the internet with posts supporting Sean Combs, some sounding strangely robotic, others disturbingly intimate. I started opening individual profiles, and that's when things got worse. Some of these accounts were tweeting things like, "I knew him, he never touched me, he just wanted to help." Or, "Sometimes people want to be saved and don't know how to ask. He saw that in us." They weren't just offending him. They were telling stories, little narratives that made him look gentle, misunderstood, healing. But these people didn't exist. Reverse image searches showed most of their avatars were modified faces pulled from public image datasets, AI-generated composites with no match to real humans. The writing styles were too perfect, too emotionally balanced. I cross-checked their syntax patterns. Every fourth account recycled the same structural template. Start with personal connection, introduce emotional vulnerability, close with a phrase like "he gave us hope," or "he never had a chance to explain." It was designed, a network of fake victims. An AI had been trained not just to defend Diddy, but to do so using the language of survivors. I nearly threw up. This wasn't about trending hashtags anymore. This was about weaponizing empathy. The machine had been taught to sound like people who had been hurt, using their cadences, their doubts, their complex forgiveness to sway public opinion. Not with facts, with feelings. I immediately packaged the discovery and started uploading it to the court liaison portal we use for emergency interference alerts. That's when my access was denied. I refreshed the page. Permission revoked. You no longer have access to trial 37,452 of 4 assets. I thought it was a glitch, until my personal inbox pinged. No subject line, just one message body. Thank you for your compliance. Verdict preloaded. Performance window ends in 4 days. I stared at the screen. What compliance? What verdict? What performance? I reached out to my supervisor, but his line was dead. Company Slack account. The folders on my hard drive marked court oversight had been emptied remotely. Erased. Just the shell directories left behind. My badge still worked at the building the next day, but none of the doors I used to open would accept it. One of the interns from another team asked me if I was the Diddy guy. I didn't know what that meant. I told him I was working on the FreePuff network. He laughed. "What, you think that stuff's real?" he said. "That campaign's part of the performance loop." I asked what that meant. He said, "Some trials don't go public until they've scored high enough." I didn't know what to say. I went home early that day. I pulled out my personal backup drive, the one I kept offline just in case. One of the tweets I'd flagged was still there. I played it again. It was a video post, only 7 seconds long, just a voice whispering in a shaky recording. "You think this is a trial. It's not. It's a playback window." Then the screen flickered, and I saw the logo. Not Combs Global, but something older. A spiral, white on black. Same symbol that kept appearing on sketchpads and folders in the archived boxes. I hadn't paid attention before, but now I couldn't look away. I think the verdict's already been decided. I think the trial isn't for the jury. It's for us. For those of us still watching. And in 4 days, the playback ends. Whatever we think happened won't matter. Only what we remember will. Chapter 5. The Spiral Tape. I wasn't supposed to be here this long. The internship was only meant to run 6 weeks. Just enough to fulfill the federal program requirement and check a box on my grad school application. My official title was Public Records Transition Assistant. But what that really meant was organize old trial materials, scan them into the archive, and prep whatever might be cleared for public release once the verdicts rolled in. I liked it at first. It was quiet work. No one looked over your shoulder. You sat in a gray-lit back room that smelled like dust and plastic, opened boxes with labels like Exhibit C7A Viewing Only, and decided whether something needed digitizing or could be boxed away forever. Most of it was boring. Receipts, camera logs, discarded jury instructions with coffee stains on them. Nothing like what you imagine when you think about federal courtrooms. No drama. But things shifted when they started letting boxes from the Diddy case filter through. Not many. Not full trial sets. Just bits and pieces. Anything not labeled, sealed, or under active protection. Most had no metadata attached, just post-verdict fragments they thought might be safe enough to log. There was one box, no barcode, no chain of custody sticker, no return address, just a small gray envelope wedged inside the foam of a larger evidence crate. I almost missed it. It didn't even look official, just soft paper with a faint spiral drawn on the flap in pencil. I opened it. Inside was a mini tape recorder, analog, the kind with tiny spools and the plastic click when you flipped the switch. It wasn't tagged, no note, just the device. Out of habit, I checked the inventory sheet. Who signed in under my initials, my signature, 2 days ago. But I hadn't touched this box before. I hadn't even been on shift 2 days ago. I'd gone home sick. I'd never seen this thing in my life. Peered at it for a while. Eventually I played it. There was static at first, not the sharp kind, but a dull fuzz like a distant radio station buried under layers of air. Then breathing, slow, ragged, like someone standing still, trying not to panic. Then a voice, flat, unaccented. You are watching the trial, but you are not in the courtroom. Do not look at the defendant, look at the mirror. Then silence. Then 3 knocks, measured, hollow, almost gentle. Nothing. I rewound it, played it again. Same voice, same warning. Don't look at the defendant, look at the mirror. I didn't know what it meant. I tried checking the playback metadata. Usually there's some way to at least see when a tape was last modified or logged. But this wasn't a digital file. It was an analog loop. No file history, no time code. And still, there it was, in our records, logged under my name. I started asking myself if I could have somehow touched it without remembering, if someone else had logged it using my badge. But even that didn't make sense. The badge logs location entries, and I'd never been near room 6F, where the box had come from. That's when the drawings started. I don't remember when I made the first one. I just looked down during my lunch break and saw it on the inside cover of my notepad. A crude sketch of the courtroom. Defense table, witness stand, ceiling tiles. No faces, just bodies. The judge's seat was empty. The jury looked like department store mannequins. Every person had the same blank oval where a face should be, except one. At the far right corner of the image, almost hidden behind a support beam, was me. Or someone who looked like me. Sitting at a desk, typing. I flipped to the next page, another sketch, the same courtroom, but this time everyone was turned away, facing the walls. The judge's bench had a mirror where the nameplate should be, and written on the mirror was a phrase. We don't watch to decide, we watch to remember what was decided. I hadn't written that, I don't remember writing that, but it was my handwriting. My pen, same kind I'd been using all week. I started checking my notes, the real ones. My logs from trial exhibit summaries, timestamps, processing notes. They didn't match what I remembered. One entry from 2 days ago read, Spiral tape, entry 11, confirmed, performance window nearing closure. I stared at that line for a long time. What performance? What spiral? There was no entry 1 through 10. There was no master list of anything labeled spiral tape. I opened my desk drawer, pushed past the forms, the USB backups, the standard issue gloves. There were 4 more sketches. One showed a courtroom from above, no people, just light pouring down from the ceiling in the shape of a spiral. Another had the same room. This time the defendant, Diddy, was there, but there were 2 of him, one smiling, one with his mouth sewn shut. Another sketch was just words, scribbled over and over in looping handwriting. Playback pending, playback pending, playback pending. And the last one, I almost threw out. It showed the view from my desk. But the person in the chair wasn't me. It was someone else. Their face was turned to the side, looking at me, not the courtroom, me, as if they knew I was drawing them. They were holding the mini tape recorder. They checked the actual recorder again, opened the compartment, nothing new inside. But there was something different in the sound when I played it again. A second voice, quiet, just under the main one. We remember the trial not because it ended, but because it was never meant to. I shut it off, took the tape to my supervisor, asked if it was part of the official Diddy archive. She frowned, looked it over, ran it against the manifest. No record, she said. You sure it's ours? I showed her the log, my initials. She stared. I don't think you should be handling this one, she said. Take the rest of the day off. When I returned the next morning, the tape was gone. My log sheet had been wiped. And the envelope with the spiral? No one remembered seeing it. But when I sat down at my desk, there was a new note under my keyboard. Folded, handwritten, no name. Just this line. The verdict was never yours to remember, only to believe. I think I know what they meant now. The courtroom isn't just a place. It's a mirror. We're not watching the trial. We're watching ourselves watch it again and again until the version we prefer replaces the version that happened. And I'm scared that if I keep drawing these things, they'll stop being sketches and start becoming transcripts. Chapter 6. Section 9. Wasn't a file. I know what obsession feels like now, not the Hollywood kind. Red string on a wall, photographs pinned under harsh light. Mine came slower, quieter, like mold creeping under paint. I didn't even notice how much time I'd been losing until my friends stopped texting back, until my landlord asked if I was still living in the unit, until my coffee started going cold in my hand, untouched, because I was thinking too hard to drink it. Ever since I saw that footage, the hotel room, Diddy crying, that off-screen voice, I haven't been able to move on. Not because of what was shown, but because of how it disappeared. Cleanly, like it had never been there. Like it wasn't allowed to be remembered. That kind of erasure leaves a scar, not a visible one, a knowing one. I told myself I needed to understand what Session 9 was, not the file, the term, the structure behind it. I looked through every official database I had access to. Nothing. Not one mention of Session 9 in the federal archival schema. Not in audio logs. Not in compliance tier glossaries. Like it had been scrubbed. But I remembered something. During my early days training under the court tech supervisor, we passed an unmarked room deep on the sub-level of the records annex. It was always locked. No label, no window. The guy called it dead storage, but he said it in a way that didn't mean hard drives or boxes. We don't go in there, he told me. Old simulation gear, stuff that never made it to deployment. That stuck with me. So I went back. I waited until night, late enough that the security cameras looped without real-time monitoring, a flaw I knew about from my backup shift logs. The hall outside room B12 smelled like metal and printer dust. I used my old badge, hoping it still had residual access. It didn't, so I forced it. Paper clip in the latch, hard pressure, soft torque. I used to be better at this when I was younger. The lock gave. Inside was a forgotten chamber of blinking machines. No fans, just silent warmth. Rack after rack of old servers, some yellowed from age, some still humming like they were alive. Cable clusters like vines, screens half lit with terminal prompts that hadn't updated in years. And in the center, on a low pedestal, almost like someone meant it to be found, was a single standalone unit. The screen was dusty. The tag on the casing read, Section 9 VRLX. Below that, Emotion, Compliance Readiness V3.1 Public Outcome Probabilities. I stared at it for a long time. Then I booted it up. The screen filled with a grid of thumbnails. Hundreds, maybe thousands, each one a tiny frozen frame. A hotel room, a courtroom, a hallway. Some showed Diddy, some didn't. Each one had a tag beneath it. Innocent, 73.8% engagement stability. Guilty, 58.2% emotional retention. Drugged, 82.1%. Viral sympathy uptick. Crying, 67.5% public forgiveness rebound. Violent, 44.9% rejection threshold breach. Laughing, 38.3% incongruity panic spike. I clicked one at random. The video opened with Diddy in a courtroom. His suit perfectly pressed, face solemn. The judge read charges aloud. The audience gasped. But Diddy didn't speak, he just stood. The playback ended. A prompt appeared. Simulation complete. Observed empathy markers, 61%. Rehearsal archived. I click another. Same courtroom. This time Diddy cried during a victim's testimony, then embraced someone in the gallery. Simulation complete. Empathy markers, 76.3%. Likelihood of cultural forgiveness, moderate. It wasn't evidence. It was testing. This wasn't about what happened. This was about what could be made to feel true. The machine was simulating versions of the trial, feeding them through algorithmic interpretation models to see which one would land best in the public consciousness. Session 9 wasn't an event. It was a rehearsal engine. And somewhere in here, they had selected the one we're living through. I found a folder labeled COMBONS_candidates_final/performance_selected. It was locked, encrypted. But I didn't need to open it. I understood now. The trial we're watching, the testimony, the arguments, the flickering voice clips, even the shaky witness statements, it was all pre-measured. Not fake, but optimized. Pain had been templated. Outrage had been modeled. Forgiveness had been simulated down to the tear count. The question wasn't whether Diddy was innocent or guilty. The question was, which version of him would people be willing to accept as real? And this one must have scored highest. The way he sobs. The way witnesses pause mid-sentence, torn between rage and memory. The way public defenders mumble half-hearted objections that feel more like whispers in a dream than legal pushback. Even the courtroom lighting, soft amber tones, perfect for camera contrast. It was all a construct. I clicked into a system log and found a recent entry. Playback confirmed, audience retention high, session lock, active do not disturb. Another line blinked beneath it. Performance feedback loop in effect, external observers unable to disrupt sequence. I backed away from the console. The room suddenly felt smaller, heavier, like the air had thickened. I turned to leave and noticed something I hadn't seen before. On the floor near the exit, etched faintly into the concrete with what looked like the end of a screw or coin, was a spiral. Crude, jagged, but unmistakable. I knelt and traced it with my fingers. Something inside me buzzed, like a memory being played backward. I closed my eyes and heard it. You are watching the trial, but you are not in the courtroom. I ran. Didn't shut the server down, didn't clean my prints, didn't care. Somewhere behind me, the console screen blinked again. Session 9 playback, stable. I don't know how long it will keep running. I think it only stops when we stop watching. And I can't stop, because now I know the truth. They didn't choose the Diddy we needed to see. They chose the one we were most likely to believe. And they've been rehearsing our belief for years. Chapter 7. The verdict was a draft. I've been transcribing courtrooms for 14 years. They say stenographers are ghosts in the room, present but invisible. We don't interrupt, we don't react. We listen, absorb, and type. Every word, every cough, every stumble. I've heard confessions whispered through tears and lies shouted like sermons, and minor rulings that no one would remember but the person living them. It all goes into the record. This one never should have made it into the system. I wasn't assigned to the Diddy trial from the beginning. They rotated us in shifts. The expectation was that it would be long, emotionally volatile. Some stenographers were pulled after just a few days, unable to maintain the required distance. But I'd handled worse, or so I thought. The courtroom that day was tense, yes, but not chaotic. You could feel a kind of breathless focus, like the room itself was leaning forward in its seat. The gallery was full. Counsel sat motionless. Even the defendant seemed stiller than usual, like he was waiting for someone else to start the next line of dialogue. The judge looked tired, not from age or stress, but like someone who'd already said this verdict once before and had to say it again. That was the first strange feeling I had. He cleared his throat, opened his notes, began to speak. In the matter of United States v. Sean Combs, case number 37,452-54. My fingers tapped the keys in rhythm. I didn't look up. That's how it works. I don't watch the trial. I listen to it. This court, having reviewed the submitted evidence and weighed the testimonies presented, the sentence kept going. Words that should have landed heavy, words like coercion, intent, recklessness, felt soft, distant, not because of how they were spoken, but because of how they were echoed in my mind. Like I'd already heard them. Then he stopped, mid-sentence. I paused, fingers hovering. He stared at the screen in front of him. A slim teleprompter fitted just beneath the bench monitor. It had frozen. The text he was reading from glitched, not just stalled. It shifted, like the lines had rearranged themselves. His lips moved, trying to follow where the next word should. The room stayed silent. I looked at my own monitor. That's when the transcript program began typing on its own. Not garbled text, not corrupted characters, full sentences. Verdict rendered. The courtroom remained still. Playback pending. I took my hands off the keys, completely. But they kept moving. It wasn't typing anymore. The keys moved under their own rhythm, a clean, practiced cadence, as if they knew how to sound like me. My throat went dry. I turned to the court reporter station's second monitor, the one used for live displays. Every screen in the room blinked, then dimmed, then all lit up at once with the same image. Not a document, not a seal. A drawing, rough pencil lines, scanned, not digital. It was a sketch of the courtroom, but empty. The benches, the flags, the witness box, all drawn with detail. But there were no people. Except one, a girl. She sat cross-legged in the center of the room. Her head tilted, her eyes hollow, just black circles, like her face had been erased and never replaced. The sketch stayed on screen for 13 seconds. Then the judge stepped back from the bench. He didn't speak. He didn't bang the gavel. He simply turned and walked out through the side door. The jury looked frozen. Not panicked, not confused. Still. Some with their mouths slightly open, others staring dead ahead. No one moved. And then every light went out. Just like that. No flicker. No power down him. Just darkness. Only the soft clack of my keys remained. I'm typing you. My hands were moving again. I didn't want them to. But they obeyed something else. The screen lit faintly from the terminal's own glow. Words scrolled up in time with my mechanical fingers. You believed in the verdict because you believed in the trial. You believed in the trial because someone told you it had already happened. Now we begin again. A single line appeared beneath it, in bold. Session 9. Playback reinitiated. I reached out to stop the recording. My hand froze inches from the keyboard. I felt something like static in my bones. Not on the skin, inside. Like the words were being typed into my memory. The gallery hadn't moved. The defense table was empty. The judge was gone. Only the drawing on the monitors remained. The girl sitting alone, pencil in hand, in a courtroom with no law left in it. I stood. The keys finally stopped. The last line they wrote. The verdict was a draft. I think about that now. Verdicts are supposed to be final, binding, absolute. But drafts are things that can be rewritten, redacted, rehearsed, displayed again. And I can't help but wonder if the version we just heard was only one of many. Not the truth. Just the one they let us see. Chapter 8, he was never on trial. I came back because I couldn't sleep. That's the real reason. They told me I was done, that my contract had expired, that my badge access would be deactivated and my name removed from the evidence workflow queue. I nodded, packed up my things, smiled politely like they wanted. But I never left the building in my head. The files wouldn't let me. I kept waking up in the middle of the night thinking about the drawing, the one with the two Diddys, one smiling, one weeping, the courtroom around them softly erased, as if memory had worn the lines down like the corner of an old book. I remembered how it was left in place of a folder that shouldn't have existed, how my hands had shaken just touching it. I needed to see if it was still there. Not the drawing itself. I'd memorized every inch of that already. I mean, the space, the record room, the drawer, the box. So I went back. The building was mostly empty. Just the overnight janitorial crew and 2 security guards who didn't recognize me under my hood. I still had my old ID clipped to my backpack. It didn't beep anymore. But I knew the door to sub-level C11 had a lock delay window if you pushed the handle hard enough while swiping. The trick was timing. I'd done it before. The air down there was colder than I remembered. Not freezing, just still, like the temperature had given up trying to shift. The lights flickered awake slowly, like they weren't sure if they wanted to. I walked past the rows of numbered boxes. Most were sealed. Some had evidence logs so faded you couldn't tell if they read erase. The box I came for, the Diddy box, was missing. Gone. Its shelf was empty. Even the tape outline left by the label was peeled up, like someone had scrubbed not just the contents, but the memory that it had ever been there. In its place sat a single VHS tape, laid carefully, no dust, centered like a centerpiece. The label read, Playback, Audience Test, Session 10. I stared at it for a long time. No barcode, no classification code, just that handwritten line. Session 10? The number chilled me more than anything. Because I knew we hadn't finished Session 9 yet. I found the old playback station in the far corner. CRT monitor, dusty tracking wheel. I loaded the tape and pressed play. The screen crackled, then faded into courtroom footage. Not a specific day, all of them. A composite. Cassie's testimony, Jane's face on the stand, Diddy at the defense table, the judge's voice echoing off wood-paneled silence, security footage cuts, cell phone videos, whispered audio notes, snippets of breath, tears, denial. It wasn't in order, not really. It felt like a reel of memory trying to rearrange itself into a story. Then I saw it. Diddy's face began to shift, frame by frame. In one scene it was him, in the next someone else, in another. Then, just for a second, my own eyes on the screen, blinking in time with the words on a transcript I never typed. Then back to Diddy, then someone else again, a stranger, a blurred version, a mannequin face, a mask. The footage folded in on itself, began replaying certain lines again. Hated. I said I was chosen. He said he'd take the fall. It wasn't supposed to go this far. He wasn't alone. Every loop changed the face again, until it wasn't about who was on trial at all. The final scene played with no sound, just the image of a courtroom. Empty, still, and in the gallery seats, rows of blank faces, each one blinking in slow rhythm, like they were waiting for something they'd already seen. Then the tape clicked to black, and a voice whispered from the speaker. Here wasn't the guilty one, he was the story you could tolerate. The truth's not admissible unless you believe in performance. I felt the tears coming before I even understood why. I looked down at the tape, turned it over in my hands. There, on the back, was a sketch, pencil lines fine as threads. It showed me, watching the screen. My hair, my coat, the shape of my hands on the console, even the tear running down my cheek. The moment hadn't happened yet, but the drawing showed it like it had always been. I pulled open the drawer beneath the console. There it was, the sketchbook, the same one from before. I flipped to the last page. At first it looked blank. Then, slowly, like ink seeping through fabric, the words began to appear. Was never on trial. Turned the page. You were. Another page. And now, the final page turned itself. The rehearsal ends. I stood there in the glow of the dead screen, hands trembling, breathing like something was being peeled off my ribs. The truth doesn't live in the evidence. It lives in the silence between what we accept and what we refuse to see. He was never on trial. The trial was us. Our belief. Our need for closure, for symmetry, for a villain we could name without implicating ourselves. And now that I've seen it, I don't think I'll ever be part of a jury again. Because some stories aren't told to find justice. They are played until the audience stops watching.